Hey, in the midst of talking about depressing things, I said I was going to make this video about my health issues, and it's been a long, long time coming. I've struggled with health problems since I was about 22 years old, and mysterious, weird, hard to deal with things, and I still do struggle a little bit, but I've gotten better, and I've always dreamed of the day that I would be healed and be able to talk about it like it was in the past and not currently going on, and in hopes that I could share my story and that it would help anybody. I know there are people out there that are dealing with all kinds of different things: older people, young people, people that are, you know, dealing with treatments that are fucking up their lives and things like that. So I wanted to share my story, how my problems manifested, and where they led me to, and what I kind of came out of that with. And so let's do it. Once again, I have not planned this out. I have not made an outline where I could gracefully go through this information. And it's just me talking to myself or you. So I was a very healthy kid. I was a very healthy teenager. I never had any problems whatsoever. I could eat anything I wanted. I could pretty much do anything I wanted. I was completely healthy, fit, um, young person. Um, I then, when I was about 20, I had reoccurring strep throat to the point where they had to take my tonsils out. I remember being very afraid as a singer that it was going to affect my voice, and it didn't. Thank God. That's irrelevant. Anyway, that was the first time I struggled with something that was happening over and over again where my health wasn't perfect. After that procedure, about 5 days later, the cauterized wounds opened up, and I just started bleeding, and had to go back at 2 a.m. and have them recauterize and put me under again, and that was a terrible, terrible experience. So anyway, and having that heal, if you've ever had your tonsils taken out, my uvula was swollen to like this big. You know your uvula, the thing in the back of your throat that's like that big? It was fucking horrible. Anyway, that was, like I said, that was the first time I dealt with any kind of health issue. If you saw my video on depression, where I was just talking and rambling about those things that have happened in my life and how it's carried through my life, you'll know that I went to school for animation. I got a stupid job outside of that and just felt completely the most empty I've ever felt while working that job, and started smoking a lot of weed. A lot is not very much for me. It was just I would get high like every night or every other night and just be in that high world. Weed was amazing when I was able to enjoy it. Just completely teleported to another place and just wonderful, wonderful thing. Until it wasn't. I lived in this shitty old house, and it was a duplex, but it was not just a wall separating us. It was kind of like floors, so you could kind of sometimes hear the people down there or above you, and it was a shitty, shitty place. Dusty, old wooden floors. It sucked. Anyway, that family, including like a 12-year-old son and probably a 16-year-old son, and the father, all smoked and drank all the time. Um, the kid, when people, here's the thing, you probably already know, or maybe you don't, but when people smoke weed and they love it and they find out that somebody else smokes weed, it doesn't matter any information about that person. They're just like, hey, you smoke? We should smoke sometime. It's a terrible idea. But anyway, that's the way that it goes. So, and especially back in the fucking, we're talking like when I was 22, I'm 35 now. Weed was not easy to get. So this shitty neighbor that I had nothing in common with started finding out that I smoked, and then I would get home from a stupid day of work where I hated life, and he'd be like, "Hey man, do you want to smoke?" And I'd be like, "Mm-hmm, yes, I do want to do that." So one day he brought a joint over, and I didn't smoke joints, dude. I'm not. I don't. That's too much weed. So I was trying to keep up with that, and then I started noticing what some people already are probably relating this to, which is called, I think they call it a whiteout experience, where your heart just starts going like this. And I was sitting there, high out of my mind, and then starting to realize that. And my brain had never really had a panic attack or had anxiety before, so I wasn't very privy to these types of feelings. And for the next 4 to 5 hours, I had pretty much the most panic and anxiety I'd ever experienced because I thought I was going to die. I know a lot of people deal with cocaine and they deal with these episodes and then they just go live their lives or whatever the hell they do. But anyway, this fundamentally changed my entire life. And after that, I was kind of normal. I kind of tried to smoke a little bit, but it almost always went right back to the same place, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And I started noticing that I was getting a lot of stomach problems, just burning in my stomach for days after. And then at one point, I felt my heart was different, and I found out that I had developed a heart arrhythmia. It wasn't severe, but it was in my mind after that experience. It was absolutely severe. It was mostly that when I would breathe in, my heart rate would speed up considerably, and then it would stop when I would breathe out, and then so it was. This is actually more normal than I would have known at the time, or I wish I would have had a doctor that would tell me it's relatively normal. But the skip in between was kind of the problem. Either way, I had felt like I had absolutely fundamentally fucked myself up, and I was just beating myself up for many, many years, like, this is your fault, you're using drugs, and you fucked yourself up. So I started having panic attacks and relating to my heart. And when I had the first couple panic attacks, many people that have had these episodes know that, if they've had enough of them, that you don't actually become necessarily afraid of what was sort of causing the panic attack in the first place. You become afraid of the panic attack itself, because going through a panic attack is terrifying. If it's a bad panic attack, my panic attacks were so bad, and they mostly happened when I was driving, that my entire body would go numb. It would actually spread out from here. You can't see that. It would spread out from here, and just my hands and everything would cripple, and I would literally become numb. And while driving, that's a little frightening. So keep moving forward in life. I started getting chronic pain and fatigue. I would have chronic pain in my neck and shoulders every day, all day. Never, there's nothing I could do to release it. It was just there all the time. And it existed for about 11 to 12 years. Day and night, sleep didn't make it better. Nothing made it better. I got massages, and it would go away for about, like a half an hour to an hour, and I'd be like, oh man, that's the answer, and then it would come right back. Another thing that got added on top of this, and God, I wish I would have known faster what the problem was, because I went through so many diets and things that I tried to do to figure out how I could be healthy and how I could make it better. But what happened was, I remember the first time it happened, I had some coffee at work, and it had cinnamon in it. And then after I drank it, I felt like I'd been poisoned. I literally felt it spread out through my bloodstream. And then I felt fuzzy-headed. My eyes become glazed over and glossy and like sensitive to light. And I would feel like shit, dizzy and like shit. So I was like, oh, it's cinnamon. Obviously, I had coffee all the time before that. Why the fuck would it be any different? Keep going. Me and somebody else, the job I had, the first professional job I had, we're like, oh dude, it's mold in the thing. And this is what a lot of people do when they have a random problem that they can't solve, like health wise. They start, it's because Joe wears a deodorant that I'm allergic to, and fucking Joe needs to get out of here. So mine was, it was cinnamon. Maybe it's a food allergy. It was the mold in the fucking ductwork, and then they had it tested, and they're like, no. I had a friend that went through a very similar situation where he thought it was his fucking couch. He thought it was the couch fabric. It's terrible to go through this stuff. I went probably for an entire decade, and I was a vegetarian for 3.5 years because I thought maybe that would make me healthier. It didn't. I was a vegan for a couple months, didn't do anything. Wheat-free for months, didn't do anything. And I know people jump on that and be like, if you're going to be wheat-free, you'll only feel the results of feeling wheat-free if you only do it for like a year. And you're like, fucking whatever, man. Everybody's got different stuff. Either way, it turned out I actually ate for 2 weeks one time, just broccoli and rice and chicken. No seasonings, whatever. every meal for 2 weeks straight, just out of desperation of trying to figure out what was going on. Still had the same episodes, still had felt the same, everything. Yeah, it was just the rabbit hole of bullshit that I was going through. Um, I finally started to figure out at some point that sugar was causing, some carbs and sugar were causing these reactions. And my wife found something online, thank God, about hypoglycemia and reactive hypoglycemia, which is what I have. A lot of times when people have these problems, they're brought on by other health problems, and they're just a thing that happens along with it. Mine, I don't know what the other thing is, but that's what has been going on so long in my life. Basically, what happens is that, just like the coffee thing, I'll have maybe too many carbs or sugar or something like that. My insulin will spike. It'll go way up, and then within about 15 minutes to a half an hour, it will completely drop to the point where I don't feel high either. I don't get to actually feel good. I'm not like, yeah, and then it sucks. I feel totally normal, and then I don't. And like I said, my eyes glaze over, and my pupils dilate, and get fuzzy-eyed, and cloudy-headed, and I feel out of control in my body. I actually feel like both sides of my brain aren't communicating correctly, and I'll get dizzy, which can be very frightening for somebody with a panic disorder and anxiety. And when that would happen, my pain that I kind of always had would flush and get worse. And then once it got worse at a certain time in the day, it would stay worse the rest of the day. And yeah, so anyway, we found that out, and we did this little test where we got one of those diabetes blood test things. And then we tested my blood sugar, and then I drank like a bunch of juice, like grape juice or some shit. And then we tested it, and we saw that that's exactly what happened. Once again, what's causing me to have hypoglycemic reactions, we don't know. So up until probably about a year or two ago, I'm knowing this and starting to live a little bit of a different lifestyle, or at least having less carbs in my life, or knowing when it happens and gets worse and when it's not, I was able to navigate and kind of start to feel a little bit better, or at least not have those episodes. And then along with that, thank God, my pain diminished, and I wasn't in as bad of pain anymore, which now is to a point where I'm not really in pain every day. And I've imagined having this video and talking about this so many times and just weeping and talking about like, oh my God, I'm not in pain anymore. Because nobody I've ever met could even get close to understanding what it's like to be in pain for a couple months, let alone 11 to 12 years, day and night. I'm not talking about my fucking back hurts and sometimes it hurts and then it goes away. I'm talking about continuous pain, day and night, unrelievable. Drugs don't help. Ibuprofen, all that stupid shit doesn't help, and nothing helps. Stretching makes it worse. Anyway, I'll stop talking about that. Yeah, I imagine making this video for so long and being able to say like, you know, oh my God, I'm not in pain anymore, and here's my journey and my story. Well, here it is anyway, but it's not quite like that. When the pain started to subside, I just kind of was living normally, and it happened over such a kind of slow period of time that I just started to get to these times where I was like, oh my God, I'm not in pain right now. What the hell happened? There's definitely still spikes where it'll happen. I'm in some pain today. Sometimes I'll have like I have decaf coffee every day. Sometimes they'll make it caffeinated, and caffeine above all fucks me up. It makes everything worse. It's that's that response really badly. So yeah, anyway, it still happens sometimes, but I've gotten to a place now where I'm actually a little bit better and healthier and feel more normal. And yeah, I wanted to make this video to talk about it. Like I said, there's a lot of people out there that are dealing with stuff like this, or that may have or may have not. Most of my life dealing with it, people would just be like, oh man, what are you dealing with? Oh, you're too young to deal with that, as if that justifies like, oh yeah, I forgot, I should just stop being a fucking sick person. And yeah, it doesn't mean anything. It's just people being confused and doctors being confused. I swore off doctors for so long because they just would tell me it was in my head. That's fucking terrible. And then I finally succumbed to, mental anxiety fucking drugs way back in the day. I got Xanax, and they told me, you just take it whenever you feel anxious. And just they didn't tell me how much or anything. So I started taking it, and it didn't do anything. Drugs barely ever do anything for me. And I'm a big person, sort of. At 220 pounds, I'm 6'2". But it didn't do anything. But when I tried to come off of it, I started to hallucinate and have terrible back pain and stuff. And it was terrible and awful. And I had to literally take it and wean myself off over a course of like 2 weeks. Every 4 hours I needed to have it in my system, or it was fucking pandemonium. I even had to wake up in the middle of the night. That was how terrible it was. And then the last day when I didn't have any, it was just a fucking nightmare. But anyway, so I never did anything like that either. And oh yeah, I forgot. I said it didn't do anything. Well, it did some things. It made it made one of my eyes dilate more than the other, and I felt really unbalanced. And I called the doctor, and he said it sounded like I was having a stroke. And once again, for somebody with a panic disorder and anxiety and stuff, that was horrifying. My one eye actually still dilates more than the other one, and who knows what, maybe it was fucking always like that, and I just didn't notice. But anyway, yeah, that stuff can be good for some people, and it can also do terrible things for people as well. But yeah, I swore off doctors. People said it was in my head. It had not been in my head. My family, not supportive of these things at all, made fun of me all the time. Oh, you're always sick. You always feel bad. My wife, thank God, she was able to stay with me. It has still not been completely healed in our relationship. The fact that I was this sick, broken, unconfident person for so long. Whereas when she met me, of course, we've been together for 16 years now. When she met me, I was not ever that person. I was a very confident, handsome young man. And then, you start to have your life and the things that you do, and then this happens, and then I was completely changed. I was asking everybody everywhere we went about, their health and how things are, and I was just a fucking wreck. And we were able to get through that, but like I said, sometimes it's still hard for her to not see me as this broken person, even though I haven't been necessarily that way even though I haven't necessarily been that way for a long time now. It's probably been 5 years that I've literally been able to be a lot healthier and be a lot more normal and not be bombarded by anxiety and shit like that, or have random panic attacks. If I do have panic attacks now, it happens maybe once a year. Well, randomly I'll just start feeling those feelings, and I can't breathe my way out of it, and it just turns into like that shit again. I know that some people, if they do see this, and I hope it helps anybody that sees it, but I know some people are probably gonna say, how did you get over your panic disorder or your panic attacks and anxiety? Like, how did you get out of that? Man, I don't actually know what it was called, but my anxiety and panic was literally related to my body and my heart. So it was a fear based on feeling my heartbeat, feeling like my heart was going to stop, and just carried on for years and years like that. Always feeling like I'm going to have a heart attack. Always feeling like my heart's going to stop. Over and over and over and over. And then every time I'd feel a physical sensation, it would manifest into like those same fears, and then just go down the rabbit hole of terribleness. How did I get over it? I mean, with any of this stuff, sadly, the best way is to confront it and to push back against it in the opposite direction. So one of the things back when I skateboarded a lot more was that I would, and running, jogging, I'm a runner, was to force myself to get my heart to a very elevated rate, and then just lay there and feel it, and just have to feel it and have to go through it. Similar if you have a fear of going up steps, most therapists and stuff are gonna be like, you gotta go up the steps. I have a friend that deals with a fear of choking, and hopefully it didn't come from weed, because once again, if you use substances and get into these other parts of your brain that aren't as accessible when you're feeling normal, they can just latch onto you, and then you can just all the time have these things. And with time, you're going to get to a place where you've dealt with it enough, and you recognize the feelings enough that you're just like, okay, I've been here. I know what's going on. I know that I'm causing this, and I know that I'm making this happen, or the situation around me is making it happen, and that it's going to end the same way it's always ended. Maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit worse, but it always ends the same way. I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. I'm still fine. And it just starts to lose its weight, and it starts to lose its power, and you just stop giving as much of a shit. It doesn't feel as frightening. And yeah, and then the anxiety starts to dwindle away as well. You got to get to a point where you can start to be kind to yourself when this stuff happens, and not fight back against it as much, and just recognize, like, okay, that's happening right now, and you know, it's not in control of me. I'm in control of it, and I can just. But I know the feeling a lot of times is just the pushing back against it, like, no, don't happen. If you put me on a plane right now, it's always just like, oh man, I hope that doesn't happen. But normally I'm able to be like, it's all good. I can just breathe through this a little bit. And yeah, there was actually a time, one last thing I'll say, where, since I kept having panic attacks when I was driving, where my body was so into the other side of the body has two different sides, which are fight and flight, and then the relaxed kind of mode. I forget what they're called now. I'm sorry, I don't have the terminology, but my nervous system was just constantly in the fight and flight mode. So just everything was always just, this kind of fucking situation where, anyway, any sensation I would always take and make negative and take it to a place where, and that's why I couldn't walk for quite a while, because feelings through my feet would make me feel like they were in my chest, or make me feel like they were going, like, heart attack feelings and all this bullshit. And I had to get to a place where, when I was driving, this is very embarrassing to say, but I would lightly just rub my leg or my arm in a nice way that felt just nice, so that I would remind myself that there was, like, good feelings, and not just everything in my body's a bad feeling. And I know that sounds totally goofy, but that was something I literally had to do. I never read any books about anxiety, or had any, like, tapes or hypnosis things or anything that ever helped. It was always just me trying to figure it out, and trying to get my way through it. Yeah, if you have a support system and you have somebody that's trying to help you through it, it's really great. I never really did. And my wife definitely helped me in certain times, but then she was also carrying the weight and the burden of hearing about this shit, and seeing me be a broken, fucked up person. Not fucked up, but, not the person that she married or that she wanted to be with. So, anyway, stay strong. I don't know what other advice I can give. I just wanted to share my story, and I hope it helps somebody. So, thanks for listening.